I am Rachel Miller, I'm 27, and the moment I realized my entire childhood was a lie began on an ordinary Tuesday evening I almost didn't come home for. I'd been working late, finishing up reports at the small design firm where I'd landed my first real job after college. My parents' house was only 15 minutes from my cramped apartment, but I'd avoided visiting lately. Not because I didn't love them, but because lately, every visit left me feeling like a guest in my own story. Mom had called that afternoon, her voice sugar-sweet. "Dinner tonight, sweetheart. Your father misses you." It sounded innocent enough. So I packed my laptop, bought a pie from the bakery near the office, and drove through light rain, telling myself I was a good daughter for showing up at all. When I pulled into the driveway of our old blue Colonial, everything looked exactly the same. The porch light was on, warm against the drizzle. The same windchime clinked softly near the door. And inside, the smell of Mom's lasagna hit me the second I stepped in, comforting, nostalgic, safe. Or so I thought. We ate like we always did, Dad quiet, Mom cheerful to the point of forced. She asked about my job, the polite questions, the ones that never dug deeper. Dad mostly pushed his food around. When I asked him how work was going, the car shop he'd owned for 20 years, he shrugged. Same old, ratch. And Mom would cut in, changing the subject to my hair, my clothes, the neighbor's new dog. I told myself not to overthink it. Families have quiet dinners. Not every silence hides a secret. I helped Mom clear the dishes, carrying plates into the kitchen, listening to her hum some old tune that made my chest ache with a feeling I couldn't name. It should have ended there. Me driving home, another polite evening checked off. But my phone buzzed in my purse, a reminder about a late client email I'd forgotten. So instead of leaving, I wandered back into Dad's office to borrow his Wi-Fi. That's when I heard it. Mom's voice, sharper than I'd ever heard. "You're pathetic, David. You think she doesn't notice how miserable you are? Do you want her to find out what you've done?" I froze by the half-open door, the rain tapping at the windows behind me. Dad's voice came low and broken. "Margaret, please. Not tonight. Not with Rachel here." I should have left. I should have coughed, made a noise, anything. But something heavy rooted me to the floor. I leaned closer instead, my heart pounding in my ears. "Don't please me," Mom spat. 28 years, David. 28 years you've threatened to walk out. And every time, I found a way to keep you here." Dad said nothing. I heard the squeak of his chair as he shifted, the sigh that said he'd given up this fight long ago. Mom laughed then, the coldest sound I've ever heard come from the woman who'd kissed my scraped knees and braided my hair. "You were going to leave me when I was pregnant. Remember? And what stopped you? Our sick little girl. Poor, frail Rachel." My breath caught in my throat. I pressed a hand over my mouth. They couldn't be talking about me. Not like that. Dad's voice was a whisper. "Don't do this, Margaret." Mom ignored him. "I told you she had that heart condition. I told you she needed you. And you stayed. You always stayed. Because you're too weak to leave a sick child." My hands were trembling. Heart condition? I remembered the pills, the appointments, the constant hush when people asked too many questions. I remembered missing field trips because I was fragile. I remembered Mom's soothing voice telling me I couldn't run too fast, couldn't swim too long, couldn't risk getting tired. I remembered Dad holding me while Mom explained why he had to cancel his business trips, because I needed him. Dad's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. "You made me choose. You used her." Mom's tone turned soft then, a voice she'd used on me so many times. "We needed you. She needed you. And look, we're still here, aren't we? Together. Just like it should be." A chair scraped back, footsteps moved toward the door. I backed away so fast I knocked over a photo frame on the hall table. The crash echoed through the house like a gunshot. Mom appeared in the doorway, her smile back in place so quickly I wondered if I'd imagined the ice in her voice. "Rachel. Still here? I thought you'd left." Behind her, Dad wouldn't look at me. He stared at the floor, shoulders slumped like he'd aged 20 years in 20 minutes. I stammered. The lie wouldn't come. The pie box in my hand felt absurd now, like a prop in a play where I didn't know my lines anymore. Mom stepped forward, brushing hair from my cheek like I was 5 years old again. Drive safe, sweetheart. Text me when you get home. I nodded, numb. I stepped into the rain without my coat. The night air felt like needles on my skin, but not half as sharp as the words still ringing in my head. I drove aimlessly for an hour before pulling into my apartment lot. I sat in the dark car, hands gripping the wheel, replaying every doctor's visit, every canceled trip, every time Dad stayed home when his friends asked why he didn't just leave. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with brutal clarity. My illness. My whole childhood. A lie. And if that was true, what else had they hidden? I didn't know then that the answer would destroy the last pieces of the family I thought I had left. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying every doctor's appointment, every whispered conversation I'd never been meant to hear. By sunrise my pillow was damp and cold. The rain outside had stopped, but inside my mind it kept pouring. By 8, I'd made up my mind. If anyone had answers, it was Dad. I didn't trust Mom to tell me the truth, not after hearing her voice slice through my childhood like a knife through silk. But Dad, he'd always felt like my ally, somehow. Quiet, gentle, never raising his voice when Mom snapped hers. I skipped work, pulled on yesterday's jeans, and drove back to their house. The same blue colonial, the same windchime, the same lie of normalcy in every perfect flower bed. I didn't even knock. I still had my key. Inside, I found Dad at the kitchen table, mug in hand, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept either. He looked up when I stepped in. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then I heard my voice, hoarse and trembling, Dad. Tell me the truth. His shoulders sagged. He set the mug down so carefully it didn't even clink. How much did you hear? Enough. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. I couldn't trust my legs to hold me if I stopped moving. Is it true? Was I ever really sick? He rubbed a hand over his face, the stubble rough against his palm. Your mother, she thought if you were sick, I'd stay. Don't say she. What about you? The word spat itself from my mouth before I could stop it. You knew. Didn't you? He flinched. That told me everything. I suspected, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. At first, I didn't. The tests, they were inconclusive. She convinced the doctors you needed more checkups, more scans. She switched clinics when one didn't agree. By the time I realized, I slammed my hands on the table. The echo made him jump. By the time you realized what, Dad? That you were letting her poison me with fear? He didn't defend himself. Didn't even look away. Just sat there, hollowed out, his eyes shimmering in the pale morning light. I wanted to leave so many times, Rachel. I packed bags. I looked at apartments. But she'd remind me, what if she was right? What if you really were sick? And if I left, who would take care of you if she didn't? The coffee pot hissed behind him, an absurd soundtrack to this confession that was shattering my world, piece by piece. I shook my head. So you stayed. And let me grow up believing I was broken. He pressed his hands together like in prayer. I thought I was protecting you. The laugh that tore from my throat sounded like someone else's. Protecting me? From what? Living? Silence. So heavy I thought I might drown in it. I wanted him to fight back. To stand up, slam his fist, say I'd misunderstood. Instead he just sat there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Does anyone else know? I asked, my voice cracking. Family? Doctors? He swallowed. A few doctors probably guessed. But she was careful. Always found second opinions. She knew which pills would make you tired, pale. She controlled the story. And he cut himself off, as if the rest of that sentence might choke him. The kitchen clock ticked. The neighbor's dog barked outside. I thought of every birthday party I'd missed because Mom said I might get too excited. Every gym class I'd sat out while kids peeked through the glass, whispering about the fragile girl with the pale face and the excuses. Dad, I whispered, my throat raw, why didn't you tell me when I got older? When I was strong enough to know? He looked at me then, really looked. His eyes were bloodshot, his lips trembling. Because I was a coward, Rachel. I thought if you didn't know, you'd stay too. I was afraid you'd hate me. I laughed again, but this time it curdled into a sob. Well, congratulations. You got both. I grabbed my keys, my bag. He didn't stop me. Didn't reach for my arm like he used to when I was little and scared of the dark. I was halfway to the door when he said my name. I turned, waiting for an apology, a lie, anything. Instead, he just said, "I'm sorry it wasn't different." I slammed the door so hard the windshield clattered behind me like distant applause. In my car, I let the tears come. Hot, unstoppable. I didn't know where to go, but I knew one thing for certain, I wasn't done. If they'd lied about this, what else was buried under our perfect family dinners and polite Sunday calls? And more than that, who else deserved to know the truth? I opened my phone, thumb hovering over my contacts. There he was, Uncle Greg. Mom's brother. The only person who'd ever dared to stand up to her, years ago, before he moved states away. I hit call. When he answered on the second ring, I said 3 words I'd never imagined would pass my lips. Uncle Greg. Help me. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time since that Overheard fight, I felt something like hope. I don't remember driving to Uncle Greg's house, only the static blur of highway signs and my phone buzzing with messages I didn't answer. I just remember pulling up to his place 3 hours later, my eyes burning from crying and the stale smell of fast food wrappers filling my car. Uncle Greg's porch light was on, though it was barely dusk. He opened the door before I even knocked, like he'd been waiting behind the curtain, watching for my headlights. He hadn't changed much since I was a kid, same broad shoulders, same graying stubble. The only difference was the worry deepening the lines around his eyes. "Rachel," he said, voice low. He opened his arms and, before I could stop myself, I stepped into them. For a moment I felt 8 years old again, hiding behind him at family barbecues when Mom's smile turned tight and sharp. Inside, the living room was warm and cluttered, books stacked on every surface, half-finished wood carvings by the window. It smelled like coffee and sawdust, a smell I'd always associated with safety. He guided me to the old plaid couch, handed me a mug of tea I didn't remember him making, and waited. I didn't even know where to start. So I said it plain. I know about the fake illness. About how Mom kept Dad from leaving by making me her excuse. I heard them fighting. Greg didn't flinch. Instead, he sat back, like I'd confirmed something he'd long suspected. I wish I could say I was surprised, he sighed. But Margaret, she always needed control more than love. I tried to warn your dad once. Didn't stick, obviously. My hands trembled around the mug. She told him I was sick to make him stay. And he let her. All these years, my throat closed around the words. Greg's eyes softened. I always thought you seemed too healthy for all those conditions. But every time I asked questions, your mother shut me out. She made me the black sheep for even asking. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, my voice sharper than I meant. He didn't take offense. He just leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because I didn't have proof. If I'd told you and you went back to her, she'd twist it. Make me look like the villain. You were just a kid, Ratch. You wanted to believe your mother loved you. A silence settled between us, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, I whispered the worst part out loud. I feel like my whole life was stolen. I don't even know who I am without that story. Greg nodded slowly. I know. That's what people like your mother do. They build cages you can't even see. He stood up suddenly, moving to a shelf cluttered with old files and boxes. After a moment of rummaging, he pulled down a battered manila folder. I've kept this for years. Never knew if I'd ever give it to you. Inside were papers, old medical statements, letters, even faded prescription notes. Some were photocopies. Some looked like they'd been snatched straight from a filing cabinet. I asked a friend of mine back then, a nurse who worked at that first clinic your mom used, Greg explained. She told me she'd seen your mother pushing for extra tests you didn't need. Always second-guessing doctors when they said you were fine. Even tricking one into signing off on a specialist referral for a rare genetic issue nobody could verify. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking worse than before. One letter caught my eye, a doctor politely refusing further treatment, saying no evidence supported the diagnosis Mom insisted on. Dated when I was 5. All this time. She'd kept going until she found someone who'd play along, or didn't care enough to question. Greg pointed to a note at the bottom. Your father came to me once, years ago. He knew. Or at least, he knew enough. I told him to take you and run. But Margaret, well. She knew exactly what to say to keep him tethered. Anger sparked under my ribs. Not hot and explosive, but cold, focused. She ruined him too, I muttered. Turned him into a ghost. Greg didn't disagree. He just rested a hand on my shoulder. What are you gonna do now? I looked up from the folder, the edges of the paper cutting into my palms. I don't know. But I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I can't let her get away with it. Not after everything she took. Greg's mouth curled into a sad smile. Good. That's the Rachel I remember. The kid who always asked, why, when your mother barked an order. A cold dread slid down my spine. Do you think she'd lie about other things? About me? About Dad? Greg's eyes darkened. He hesitated, then nodded toward the folder. There's more you need to see. And it's worse than you think. I braced myself. Show me. He pulled out one last document, a copy of a life insurance policy, years old. My father's name. My mother's name. And mine, listed as a dependent with a special clause. If anything happened to me, the payout doubled. The room tilted. I pressed my palm to my mouth. She insured me? Greg's voice dropped to a whisper. I think you were always more valuable to her sick than well. And if you weren't sick enough, well. She always had a backup plan. The truth slammed into me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about keeping Dad. It was about control, money, security, power. And I'd been her pawn since the day I was born. I stood so fast the mug slipped from my lap, splashing cold tea on the rug. I have to confront her, I said, my voice shaking but certain. She needs to look me in the eye and say it out loud. Greg didn't stop me. He just handed me the folder. Then you better be ready, Rachel. She'll never admit it without a fight. Outside, the sky had turned the color of bruised peaches, dusk creeping in around the edges. As I stepped back into the night, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't a sick little girl anymore. I wasn't her excuse. And I was done being her secret. The drive back to my parents' house felt like steering straight into the eye of a storm. I kept glancing at the passenger seat, where Greg's battered folder sat like a bomb waiting to go off. The closer I got, the more I felt that old pull, the obedient daughter's instinct to turn the wheel, go anywhere but home. But that girl didn't exist anymore. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same. The porch light glowing warm. The curtains drawn neat. Like the lie it had always been, perfect, polished, hiding rot beneath. I stepped inside without knocking. Mom was in the living room, curled on the sofa with her laptop, a cup of tea balanced on a coaster. She looked up, and for a second, just one, I saw a flicker of something. Surprise? Worry? But then her face smoothed over, the perfect mask sliding back into place. Rachel, darling, she said sweetly. You should have called. I would have made dinner. I laughed. Actually laughed. It came out harsh, wrong in this tidy room that still smelled faintly of the lasagna I'd eaten days ago. Sit down, I said. My voice was steady, almost calm. But inside, something sharp was clawing at my ribs. We're going to talk. She raised an eyebrow but didn't move. Sweetheart, if this is about last time, your father and I. Sit down. She must have heard something in my voice, because she did. Slowly, like she was still pretending she had the choice. I dropped the folder on the coffee table between us. Papers spilled out, the fake test results, the old letters, the insurance clause. I didn't bother stacking them neatly. Let the mess show. Her eyes flicked over the pages, then back to me. The smile slipped just a fraction. Where did you get this? Greg kept it. He tried to warn Dad. He tried to warn me. But you were too good at shutting him out, weren't you? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She reached for her mug, a stall. Always the calm queen in her little kingdom. I didn't give her the chance. You made me sick, I said, the words tumbling out before my courage could drain. You lied to Dad. You lied to me. You trapped us both in this house like prisoners, pretending it was love. She clicked her tongue, like she was scolding a child for using the wrong word at the dinner table. Rachel. You don't understand. Explain it then. I shot to my feet, heat prickling behind my eyes. Explain why there's an insurance policy with my name on it. Explain the fake pills, the fake tests, the fake life you built around keeping me sick and helpless. She flinched then, just barely. But I saw it. A crack in the marble statue she'd carved for herself. I did what I had to do, she said finally, her voice low, steady. You were my daughter. You are my daughter. I protected you from a broken world. I protected this family from falling apart. Your father. Don't you dare blame him. The anger surprised me, how fierce it came, cutting through the last threads tying me to her version of the story. He stayed because he was afraid you'd break me more than you already did. She stood then, tea forgotten, her chin lifting the way it always did when she was about to deliver the final blow in an argument. He stayed because I gave him something to stay for. You think he loved you enough on his own? He would have walked away if I hadn't reminded him every day that you needed him. My hands were shaking. I hated how she could still make me feel small with a single sentence. You poisoned me, Mom. You stole my childhood. You made me believe my own body was my enemy. How do you live with that? Something flickered in her eyes, not regret, not shame. Something colder. Don't be dramatic, Rachel. You were always too sensitive. You needed me to keep you safe. You think you'd be who you are now if I hadn't kept you close? I almost laughed again, but it came out like a sob. Who I am now? Who am I, Mom? Tell me. Because I don't even know anymore. She took a step closer, voice softening into that velvet trap I knew too well. You're my daughter. You always will be. And you'll understand, someday, when you have children. You'll see it's not black and white. It's sacrifice. It's doing what's necessary. I looked at her then, really looked. The immaculate hair, the perfect sweater, the gentle hands that had tucked me into bed all those nights while feeding me lies. You're not a mother, I whispered. You're a warden. I turned away before she could answer, before she could twist more hooks into my skin. I grabbed the folder, stuffing the papers back inside. Behind me, her voice rose, shrill for the first time. Rachel, if you do anything with that, if you tell people, you'll destroy this family. You'll ruin your father. You'll ruin yourself. I stopped at the door. The rain had started again outside, tapping gently on the porch roof. I'm not the one who ruined us, I said. You did. And now everyone's going to know. I walked out without looking back. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than any slam could ever be. In the car, my hands were still trembling, but the fear was gone. For the first time, the weight in my chest felt lighter. I didn't know what the fallout would look like. Who would believe me? Who wouldn't? But I knew one thing, I'd never let her silence me again. She'd kept my world small for so long. Now I was going to make sure everyone saw just how big her lie really was. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. My apartment felt too small to hold the storm inside me, so I drove until the city lights faded into dark country roads. I pulled over at a rest stop just before dawn and sat there, the folder spread out on the passenger seat like a bomb I didn't know how to defuse. The truth was simple enough, I knew now. But what did I do with it? Who would believe that the sweet suburban mother who baked cookies for the neighbors and sent Christmas cards to half the town had kept her daughter sick on purpose? By mid-morning, I found myself in a diner 2 towns over, my phone buzzing with missed calls, mostly Dad, one from Mom. I let them ring. I stirred cold coffee until the waitress stopped asking if I wanted a refill. It was the text from Greg that jolted me out of the fog. Just 3 words, ready when you are. So I drove back to his place. He was waiting on the porch, 2 mugs of coffee steaming on the railing. I must have looked like a ghost because he didn't ask questions at first. He just handed me the mug and let me sit beside him while the morning sun cut through the leftover rain. Finally, I spoke. If I tell people, she'll twist it. She'll say I'm unstable. She'll say I'm lying for attention. She always makes herself the victim. Greg sipped his coffee, eyes on the old oak tree in his yard. So you don't just tell them. You show them. These papers help, but you need more. Someone who'll back you up. I shook my head. Who? Dad won't. He's too broken. And everyone else believed her. Greg didn't argue. He just said, maybe you're not the only one she did this to. I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned back, folding his arms. Your mother always needed something to hold over people. I know she had friends, other parents, who trusted her with their secrets. She used to brag about helping some neighbor keep her son in line when he acted up. Margaret's solution was always the same: control. Fear. Lies. The thought made my skin crawl. Are you saying she did this to someone else's kid? Greg shrugged. I'm saying maybe she didn't stop at you. People like her don't know how to stop. A bitter laugh scraped my throat. So what? I dig around the neighborhood like some detective? But his idea clung to me like a splinter. I thought about all the times Mom hosted playdates for families who wanted advice. I remembered a boy named Ben, pale, always coughing, his mother clinging to mine in the kitchen whispering about Dr. Bills. I hadn't seen him since we were 9. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled out my phone and searched his name. Ben Parker. The internet made quick work of secrets these days. Within minutes I found an old local article, a fundraising event for Ben Parker's rare immune disorder. Date, 2007. A photo of him in a wheelchair, looking small and exhausted. A chill shot through me. Next to him, in that photo, was my mother. Smiling her perfect smile, her arm draped protectively around Ben's mother. Greg peered over my shoulder. That's her signature move. Make herself look like a savior. I scrolled further. There it was, Ben Parker, 24 now, runs a vintage bookstore 3 towns away. No mention of illness. No fundraiser. Just a smiling headshot on the shop's website. My pulse thudded in my ears. If anyone understands, it's him. If she did to him what she did to me. Greg nodded. Then you won't be alone when you blow this open. He offered to come with me, but I needed to do it myself. So I drove to the bookstore, the folder tucked under my arm like a secret weapon. The shop was small but warm, shelves stacked high, sunlight spilling over worn wooden floors. Behind the counter stood Ben. Older, broader shoulders, faint stubble, a sleeve of tattoos I didn't remember. But his eyes, there was no mistaking them. He looked up when the doorbell chimed. For a second, confusion flickered. Then recognition. Rachel Miller? I almost forgot how to speak. Hey, Ben. It's been a while. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah. Wow. You look good. We made small talk while my heart battered my ribs. Then I set the folder on the counter between us. I need to ask you something. And it's going to sound insane. He glanced at the papers, then back at me. Try me. I took a breath I didn't have. Did my mom ever tell your mom you were sick? Sicker than you really were? His smile vanished. For a second, I saw the boy I'd known, the one who'd missed recess because he was too fragile. She said I had an immune disorder, he said quietly. That my mom had to keep me home, homeschool me. For years, I took pills that made me tired all the time. She helped my mom get disability checks. Told her how to handle the doctors. Said she was protecting me. My throat went dry. Ben, she did it to me too. My whole life. She kept me sick so my dad wouldn't leave her. She lied to you, to your mom, just like she lied to mine. He stared at me, eyes glassy. Then he barked out a bitter laugh. Jesus Christ. I thought it was just us. I thought my mom was the only one who. He cut himself off, hands raking through his hair. So what now? I slid the folder closer. Now we tell everyone. We show everyone. Together. For the first time in days, I saw it, a flicker of strength in his eyes that mirrored my own. 2 kids who'd been turned into prisoners, standing side by side at the edge of the truth. Outside the window, the sky was clearing, pale spring sunlight breaking through the clouds. For the first time since that Overheard fight, I felt something like power humming in my chest. Mom had built her world out of secrets and fear. But we weren't sick anymore. We were done keeping quiet. Ben and I sat in the cramped back office of his bookstore long after the sign flipped to closed. Between us lay the open folder, test results, old letters, insurance clauses, Each paper a piece of our broken childhoods. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The only sounds were the soft clatter of rain on the window and the hum of an old heater that smelled faintly of dust and old glue. Finally, Ben leaned back, rubbing his temples. My mom still believes it, you know. She still thinks I was born broken. She tells people I grew out of it. That Margaret saved me. I winced at her name. It felt wrong to call her mom now, like that word belonged to someone else, some imaginary version of her I'd buried for good. Do you think she'd believe you if you told her? He gave a humorless laugh. I don't know. I spent years trying to tell her she didn't need to worry. She'd just cry and say I was ungrateful. She didn't want to see it. He glanced at me, eyes tired but sharp. Do you think your dad would stand up to her if you told him about this? The insurance stuff? Me? I shook my head before he even finished. He's too deep. He'll just say he didn't know enough to stop her. He'll try to protect her, like always. A silence fell again. Heavy. But different this time, not hopeless. More like we were both waiting for the same idea to take shape. Finally, I said it out loud. We have to tell someone who will believe it. Someone who'll have to do something about it. The police. Or a lawyer. Or both. Ben didn't flinch. He just looked down at the mess of documents, then back at me. You know, if we do this, she'll come for you. She'll make you look crazy. Me too. She'll twist it. I know. I tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. But she only wins if we keep quiet. That's what she counts on, silence. Secrets. He held my gaze, then nodded once. Okay. So we talk. Who first? It took us 3 days. 3 days of printing copies, making backups, driving to the city to meet Greg's old lawyer friend who agreed to see us for free. He sat in his dusty office while I told him everything, the Overheard fight, the fake pills, the insurance clause, Ben's story. The whole time, his face didn't move much. Just the occasional nod, the flick of a pen. When I finished, my throat raw and my hands stiff from gripping my chair, he closed the folder and leaned back. This is big, he said finally. Bigger than you think. What your mother did, if you can prove it, is medical fraud. Insurance fraud. Maybe more. And if there's money involved, disability claims, insurance payouts, that's federal. Ben exhaled a slow breath. So she could actually go to prison? The lawyer's eyes softened, but his tone didn't. If a DA wants to run with it, yes. But she'll fight back. She'll hire her own lawyers. And she'll make you both look like bitter kids inventing stories for money. A knot twisted in my gut. I don't want money. I just want people to know. I want her to lose the power she's held over all of us. The lawyer folded his hands, thoughtful. Then you go public. Media, if you're ready. But be prepared, once it's out there, you can't take it back. We left his office with copies of everything in a cheap plastic envelope, our names scribbled on sticky notes. Ben and I sat in my car for almost an hour afterward, staring at the city skyline through the windshield, rain blurring the lights into streaks of gold and red. I don't want to be famous for this, I whispered. Ben's laugh cracked the silence, short, tired, but real. Don't worry. Nobody wants to be the face of Mom lied about my entire life. But maybe we don't have to be. Maybe we're just the start. The next morning, we met Greg at the same diner where I'd sat alone days before. He brought an old friend, a retired local reporter named Linda who'd done a series on insurance scams years ago. She looked at us like she was peering through a microscope, measuring how much of our truth she could trust. When I slid the folder across the table, her eyes lit up with something like hunger and heartbreak all at once. She flipped through pages, asked questions that made my skin crawl all over again. When we finished, she sat back, tapping her pen against the table. You know this will tear your family apart, she said gently. This isn't just your mother. Your father, your neighbors, anyone who stood by and let it happen. They'll be dragged into this too. I nodded. My voice felt small but certain. I know. But the family was already broken. It just looked pretty on the outside. She studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled, not wide, but real. Good. I can help you. But you have to promise me one thing, when the calls come, when people start asking for your side, you don't back down. You tell it all. I promised. So did Ben. 2 days later, the story broke, local news first. Suburban mother accused of faking daughter's illness for insurance fraud. They used my old school photo, the one mom had loved because I looked so delicate, so perfect for her story. By noon, my phone was a battlefield, reporters, old classmates, strangers. Some called me brave. Some called me ungrateful. Dad called twice. I didn't pick up. That night, Ben and I met at the bookstore. We sat on the dusty floor between shelves, our backs pressed against old wood. Neither of us said much. We didn't have to. Outside, the world was tearing itself open around our story. Inside, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not hidden. Not sick. Not silent. I didn't know what would happen next, courts, lawyers, headlines, maybe even prison for her. Maybe Dad would finally see her for what she was. Maybe he wouldn't. But for the first time, the lie wasn't mine to carry alone. And that, somehow, felt like freedom. I didn't plan to answer when Dad called again. I thought I'd made my peace with ignoring him, letting him sink into the same silence he'd chosen all my life. But on the third night after the story broke, after the first TV segment ran my photo under the headline, Mother or Monster, my phone lit up again. His name. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or the echo of old love I hadn't scraped out yet. Maybe I just needed to hear his voice one last time before I let him become a stranger too. I picked up on the fifth ring. For a heartbeat, neither of us said a word. I could hear his breathing, unsteady, like he'd run a mile he wasn't ready for. Rachel. His voice cracked. Just my name. It almost broke me. I forced steel into my throat. If you're calling to defend her, don't. I'm not listening. A rustle, like he was sitting down, maybe at that same old kitchen table where so many lies had tasted like family dinners. I'm not, he said softly. I'm not calling for her. I'm calling for you. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. I let the silence fill up with all the things we'd never said. Finally, he spoke again. I should have protected you. I should have fought her harder. I wanted to. God knows I tried, but, his voice cracked again, raw with regret that came too late to fix anything. I was so scared, Rach. Scared I'd lose you. Scared she'd make you disappear from me completely if I pushed too hard. I closed my eyes. You didn't lose me. You let her steal me. There's a difference. He let that hang between us, heavy and honest. Then he surprised me. There's something you don't know. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Isn't that our whole life? Secrets I don't know? He didn't snap back. He just sighed, that long, tired sigh I remembered from nights he'd stand outside my bedroom door, half listening to Mom tell me I was too tired for sleepovers, too weak for camp. I stayed, he said, voice so low I had to strain to hear. Because she made it clear that if I left, she'd take you. She'd disappear with you. Back then, she had enough money tucked away to vanish. And no judge would have doubted her, the perfect mother with the sick child. I knew if I stayed, at least I could be close enough to protect you from the worst of her. A sick, cold knot twisted in my chest. Protect me? Dad, you helped her keep me sick. I know. His voice broke on the words. I hate myself for it. But you don't know how many nights I switched your pills. Poured them down the drain. How many times I told her the doctor called to say your test was fine, even when he didn't. Those little fights you never saw? That was me, trying to keep you from falling deeper into her game. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. All these years, I'd pictured him passive, weak, a ghost at her table. And now here he was, confessing to small rebellions that hadn't been enough to save me, but maybe kept me from worse. She hated when you were strong, he whispered. Hated when you ran down the block when she said you shouldn't. But I loved it. Every moment you felt like a normal kid, that was me, fighting in secret. Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to. God, Rachel, I wanted to. But you were a kid. And later, you were grown. You deserved the truth from her, not from me. I wanted to hate him. Part of me did. But another part, the small, broken piece that still loved him, whispered that maybe his failure wasn't as clean-cut as I'd painted it. Maybe weakness had looked like survival too. He cleared his throat, voice steadier now. I know I can't fix it. I know you hate us. Maybe you should. But if you go through with this, the lawyers, the press, the trial, she'll come for you. And I want you to know something. What? I asked, my voice small. He paused, then, this time, if she tries to bury you again, she'll have to bury me too. The line went quiet. I pictured him in that kitchen, head bowed over cold coffee. The same man who'd let her cage me was, at last, picking up the hammer to break the lock. Too late, maybe. But not too late to matter. I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't say I didn't. I just whispered, then stand with me when the time comes. Don't hide behind her this time. I will. His voice was clear, certain, the voice I'd needed when I was 8, or 12, or 16. I swear to you, Rachel. I will. We hung up without goodbye. Some things didn't need it anymore. That night, I drove to Greg's. Ben was already there. He'd brought more old photos of him and his mom, proof of the miracle cure my mother had spun for the neighborhood back then. Greg poured us coffee, spread papers across the table. Outside, the world still believed in her polite smiles and church bake sales. But inside that small, cluttered living room, the truth was loud and bright and unstoppable. Dad would stand with me. Ben would stand beside me. Greg would fight for me. And me? I wasn't the sick girl anymore. I was the girl who'd rip the whole lie down, brick by brick, until there was nothing left for her to hide behind. The town didn't know what to do with me after the story broke. Some people pretended not to see me at the grocery store. Others looked too long, like they expected to find the sick girl they'd pitted all those years, not the woman who'd shattered their tidy suburban myth. At first, Mom stayed silent. No public statement, no tearful TV interview. Just a lawyer's comment to the news, this is a private family matter, exaggerated by a troubled daughter. I almost laughed when I read it, troubled. That was always her favorite word when the truth threatened her story. But behind that silence, she was moving. I knew it the way I knew how she brewed her coffee or folded her sweaters. I'd been raised inside her storms. So when I got the email from my old high school friend Leah, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my hands didn't even shake. Rachel, I don't know if you've heard. Your mom's planning something. She's invited the neighborhood women to our old community center tomorrow night. She's calling it a prayer circle for family healing. But people say she's going to tell her side. Be careful. Ben was the first to see the email over my shoulder. She's going to twist it, he said flatly. Turn it into her pity story. Greg leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Of course she is. She knows how to do this. Make herself the victim, make you the ungrateful daughter. She's done it before. Just never with the whole town watching. I stared at the screen, the subject line like a dare, community night for the Miller family. Part of me wanted to stay home. Let her spin her sweet lies while I held the truth like a knife no one would see. But that part of me wasn't in charge anymore. No, I said, voice steadier than I felt. If she wants a stage, she's going to have to stand on it with me right there. No more secrets. No more safe corners for her to hide in. Ben's grin was grim but approving. Then we're coming too. So the next night, we pulled into the cracked parking lot of the community center I hadn't stepped inside since I was 12. I half expected to see my old self at the door, pale, careful, always watching my mother smile for signs of which version of her I'd get that day. Inside, the main hall smelled like stale coffee and dusty hymnals. A circle of folding chairs. A table of store-bought cookies that looked like peace offerings nobody believed in. And at the center of it all, her. My mother, Margaret Miller, in her soft pink sweater, hair perfect, lips painted just bright enough to look warm on camera if any local news slipped in. She was already surrounded by neighbors, mostly older women she'd roped into charity work for years. I saw Mrs. Graham, who used to bring casseroles when I had bad weeks. Mrs. Carter, who once told people I was a miracle because I still smiled when I was so sick. When she saw me, the smile cracked, just a fraction. Then it was back, wide and gentle, just the right mix of surprise and wounded warmth. Rachel, she said, stepping forward like she might hug me. I didn't move. The air between us felt electric. I'm glad you came, she said, voice pitched for the room. This is all so painful, but I want everyone to see we're still a family. We can heal together. I cut her off. No. They're going to see the truth tonight. You don't get to hide it behind prayer circles and pity. Gasps fluttered through the room. The old ladies looked from her to me like we were a car crash they couldn't look away from. My mother's smile trembled, the first real crack in her mask. Rachel, please. Let's not do this here. We can talk later. Ben stepped up beside me, his voice calm but sharp enough to slice through her performance. No. Now's good. Because these people believed your story about her. And me. You kept me sick too, remember? A ripple of whispers. Eyes darting between us and her. Mrs. Graham clutched her purse like it might shield her from what was coming. Mom tried to keep her voice smooth. Benjamin, sweetheart, I only ever helped your mother. My mother's gone, Ben snapped. She died believing I was broken. And you made sure she did. Silence. The whole room felt like it was holding its breath. I stepped forward, my heartbeat so loud I was sure they all heard it. Look at them, I told her. Look at what you did. You told these people you were the hero. The perfect mother. You made us props in your sad little play. Her eyes darted around, searching for someone, anyone, to jump in, defend her. No one did. Not yet. Then Dad's voice cut through the tension. He stepped from the back of the room, where I hadn't even seen him come in. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years, defiance. It's true, he said, his voice cracking but strong enough. All of it. Margaret lied. She made Rachel sick to keep me from leaving. And she lied to Ben's family too. I let her do it. I'm done lying for her. A hush fell so thick you could hear the hum of the vending machine by the door. Mom's head turned toward him, eyes wide, a silent plea or a threat, I couldn't tell. Dad didn't look at her. He looked at me. And for the first time, I saw him not as the man who failed me, but as the man who was finally standing up. Too late, but not worthless. Mom's voice cracked. David, don't. But it was too late. The room had heard it. The lie wasn't hers to control anymore. People shifted in their seats, whispers spreading like fire through dry grass. For the first time in my life, I watched her face something she couldn't sweet-talk or bake her way out of. I didn't know how this would end, who would believe her excuses, who would cling to the myth of the perfect mother. But I knew one thing, the silence was gone. The secrets were rotting in the light now. She'd built this house of cards on my back. Tonight, I watched the first card fall. I don't remember leaving the community center. One minute I was standing there, my father's voice still echoing in my ears, my mother frozen under a dozen pairs of eyes that no longer saw her halo. The next, I was outside in the cold night, the door clicking shut behind me. Ben caught up first. He didn't say anything, just stood next to me under the flickering street lamp while I tried to catch my breath. Inside, the murmurs rose, blending with the hum of the vending machine and the creak of cheap folding chairs. The life I'd known was tearing itself apart room by room. A moment later the door swung open again, hinges shrieking like they didn't want to be part of this either. Dad stepped out, shoulders hunched against the wind, eyes darting to me like he wasn't sure he was allowed to look. Rachel, he started, but the words stalled. He looked so small then, not the ghost I'd blamed for years, not the coward who'd watched her twist my childhood, but just a man who'd lost every excuse to hide behind. I didn't hug him. I didn't run. I just asked, is she still in there? He nodded, rubbing his palms together like they might spark an answer. She's trying to spin it. Saying I misunderstood. Saying you, he cut himself off, shame carving deeper lines into his face. Saying I'm crazy, I finished for him. That's her last trick. Ben's voice was quiet but steady. Doesn't matter now. They heard you. They heard him. She can't sew it all back together. A part of me wanted to collapse. Another part, the harder one, the piece she hadn't poisoned, wanted to run back inside, stand on a chair, and read every line of her fake files until the walls fell down. But I didn't need to. The truth was already crawling through the town like a storm under the floorboards. It would find its way through every polite living room soon enough. Dad cleared his throat. You shouldn't come home tonight. The way he said home made the word feel wrong on his tongue. I don't know what she'll do. To you. To herself. I tried to talk her down, but I shook my head. I'm not afraid of her anymore. And I meant it. But I wasn't stupid either. Some people, when they lose the last thread of their story, they'll burn the whole house down just to stand in the ashes and pretend they're still in charge. Ben slipped his keys into my hand. Come stay at mine. Greg too. We'll figure out what's next in the morning. Dad stepped closer like he wanted to say something that would fix decades in one breath. He didn't. There was nothing left for him to say. I'm sorry, he whispered instead. I nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't goodbye. It was just enough. Ben and I drove in silence. The streets were empty, windows flickering with TV glow, where our story was probably repeating between weather updates and local sports scores. At his place, Greg was waiting on the couch, his phone full of messages, people asking if it was true, if they'd really heard what they thought they'd heard. He didn't tell them much yet. He just told them wait. Ben made tea none of us drank. I sat cross-legged on the floor, folders spread open between us again like a wound we were forcing to stay raw so it couldn't fester in the dark anymore. We didn't talk about Mom. We talked about what came next, the lawyer's next move, the reporter's next call, the court date that would come whether we were ready or not. Somewhere near dawn, Greg's phone buzzed again. A single text that made him frown before he passed it to me. Margaret left the house. No one knows where she went. The room felt smaller suddenly. I pictured her driving into the night, the careful mask on, the thing underneath loose and desperate. A cornered animal. She won't hurt you, Ben said, but the way he said it told me even he didn't believe it. She won't, I echoed. But inside, something cold coiled around my ribs, the truth that sometimes people don't go down quiet when you drag their secrets into the sun. Greg squeezed my shoulder. If she shows up here, we call the police. You don't open the door, you don't talk to her alone. Understand? I nodded. I thought of all the nights I'd dreamed of her apology, her arms around me, saying she was sorry, saying she was sick too in her own way. But now I knew better. There was no apology coming. Just the hollow shape of it she'd wave around to keep the story alive. The sun cracked over the window blinds, painting stripes across the old wood floor. I hadn't slept in 2 days, but my mind was sharp, too sharp. Ben drifted off on the couch, Greg at the table drafting emails to the lawyer. I sat with the folder in my lap, running my fingers over the papers like they were scars I needed to keep feeling to believe they were real. Somewhere out there, my mother, Margaret, was planning her last move. I knew her well enough to know she wouldn't crawl away quietly. She'd do something to remind everyone who she thought she was. She'd force the town to pick sides. To believe her story one last time, or see the truth for good. I closed my eyes and whispered to the empty room, do it. Burn it down. I'm not afraid anymore. I didn't know if I meant her house. Her mask. Her name. Maybe all of it. But I knew one thing, I'd face whatever she threw at me next. And I'd stand when the smoke cleared. The message came just after dawn. A neighbor, Mrs. Graham, the same one who used to bring me casseroles when I was too sick to eat cafeteria food, now sending me a shaky line of text that said everything without saying much at all. She's at the church. She wants to speak. Everyone's here. Be careful. I read it 3 times before showing it to Ben and Greg. Ben rubbed his eyes, looked at me like he half expected me to hide under a blanket. But Greg just leaned back in his chair and said, well, then. Time to finish this. It felt unreal, driving through our town with the sun still struggling to burn through the morning fog, watching the streets wake up around us like they didn't know what was about to crack open inside that old brick church. The parking lot was packed. Some cars I recognized, old neighbors, family friends, people who'd cooed over me at bake sales and asked about my condition, like I was a project they could feel good about worrying over. Inside, the church smelled like coffee and damp hymnals. Margaret stood at the front of the hall near the pulpit, no priest in sight, just her in a pale blue sweater that made her look soft and breakable. The perfect performance costume. When she saw me slip through the side door with Ben and Greg at my shoulders, her eyes widened just enough for me to know she hadn't expected me to come. She wanted the room to herself. To twist the story one last time while I stayed home in the dark. I wasn't that girl anymore. She started speaking before I could reach the front pews. Her voice rose, soft at first, trembling in just the right places, like a song she'd sung 1,000 times in front of different crowds. "I know many of you have heard terrible things about me," she said, her hands folded at her chest like she was praying for us all. "I know you're confused. Hurt. I want you to know, I love my daughter. I love Rachel more than my own life. And yes, I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes." A ripple moved through the pews, heads tilted, some eyes soft with the easy comfort of forgiveness before she'd even asked for it. "I was scared," she continued. "I thought she was sick. Maybe I let my fear become too big. Maybe I believed things that weren't true. But everything I did, every doctor, every test, it was all because I love her. I only ever wanted to keep my family together." I felt the old anger flare, the same sharp edge that used to cut me from the inside when she whispered over my bed at night, "Rest, sweetheart. Mama knows best." I stepped forward, Ben's hand brushing my elbow in silent backup. She paused when she saw me come to stand in the aisle, a flicker of something that wasn't fear or guilt, but pure, cold calculation. "Rachel, darling," she said, the mask slipping just a little to let her eyes glint. "Tell them it's true. That you know I did my best. That I never wanted to hurt you." I heard the hush in the room, 100 people leaning forward to see if I'd play my part one last time. I looked at my mother, the woman who'd built my whole life on a lie so neat it almost felt warm to stand inside it. And then I opened my mouth and gave her the only gift I had left. "The only thing you ever wanted was control," I said, my voice flat, loud enough for the back row to hear. "You didn't love me. You needed me sick. You needed Dad trapped. You needed neighbors to pity you. And you needed people to clap when you played the martyr." Someone near the door gasped. A few heads turned to her, some nodded like pieces were clicking into place at last. Margaret's smile didn't waver. But her eyes did, a flash of cold fury like a snake tasting the air. "Rachel, please." "No," I stepped closer. I felt Ben move with me. I felt Greg's eyes behind me like a shield. "This is done. You don't get to stand here and pretend you didn't do this on purpose. You hurt me. You hurt Ben. You stole years we'll never get back. And now you want these people to say it's okay. That it's forgivable. Well, I don't forgive you." Her mouth opened, maybe to weep, maybe to snap. I didn't care anymore. I turned to the room, to the neighbors and the old teachers and the same women who'd signed cards that said "Get well soon" when there was nothing wrong with me but her. "Believe her if you want," I said. "Stay comfortable if you need to. But when you see me at the store, when you hear my name, don't you dare ask me to play nice. Don't you dare tell me to keep the peace. The truth's out now. You don't get to stuff it back in the box just because it makes you uncomfortable." The church was so silent I could hear the heat pipes clink in the walls. My mother's hands shook just enough for the front row to see it. I stepped back then, the weight lifting like a stone off my chest. Ben squeezed my shoulder once, solid and real. Greg was already moving, collecting the people who still wanted the truth, answering questions with calm patience while Margaret stood frozen in the place where her story used to hold them all tight. I didn't stay for the rest. I didn't need to see her excuses unravel thread by thread. I didn't need to hear the gasps or the whispers or the excuses the town would trade over fences and backyards for years to come. Outside, the sun was bright for once, cold but clear. I stood on the church steps, breathing in air that didn't taste like secrets anymore. I wasn't the sick girl. I wasn't the lie. I wasn't hers. I was just Rachel. Finally. And I was free.